Okay, hello. Welcome to the Online Tennis Podcast. It's me, Jack. I'm joined by John. How you doing, John?
Not bad, as I was just saying before we went on air. The best night's sleep I've had, or the best period of sleep I've had, because some of these sleeps have been in the daytime, in about 10 days.
Yeah, not nice not to be running on fumes for once, I'm sure. I
Yeah.
feel exactly the same. Today we're going to talk fourth rounds. I think they've all been determined now. So we'll talk about a few of the upsets along the way. So we've got Nadal in there, Ruud, Jabeur, Fritz, Medvedev, etc. Got to talk a bit of Murray madness. Obviously, that's on the agenda for sure. And we'll talk a little bit about a few of our picks for the quarterfinals because at this point it's getting pretty heated. Latter stages of the tournament, pretty much the second week, so plenty to decide. And hopefully, I can make amends for my predictions in the first week. Happy to start with Nadal.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, lost to Mackenzie McDonald. Mackenzie, by all accounts, played two of the best sets of tennis I've ever seen him play. Admittedly, even if Nadal was maybe a little off, I'm not sure he would have got through those first two sets. The way he was serving, I mean, McDonald's maybe about 5'10", I think, off the top of my head. He really doesn't have a noteworthy serve normally, but the way he was playing unreturnables, aces, I think he served 8 aces the first two sets, and that's not including the unreturnables, obviously. Amazing from the back of the court, as always, at the same time. So you maybe could have seen Nadal squeezing that out in five, even if he dropped his first two sets. But in the third set, hip injury, it really, really flared up in that third set, and he wasn't able to do much. Am I missing anything there, John?
No, I can add a couple of things to that, of course. Yeah, it was something that apparently had been troubling him for a couple of days. Troubling him will probably be an exaggeration. It was something that he first felt it a couple of days before. Could you imagine Rafa going on to win the tournament, irrespective of that injury? That would be a very hard case to make. Let's say that. Now, bigger picture. His wife was in tears, and I'm not the first time to see her husband struggling with an injury like that. So I don't know whether that's telling that
Yeah.
even that her and the family, if you like, of course they have a kid now, whether that's starting to take its toll. I guess we won't see him on a tennis court until the clay court season. He said 6 to 8 weeks. That means Indian Wells 50-50. If Indian Wells has played on clay, I think we might see him there. By the way, if he had stayed fit, he may have made the semis. I think Tsitsipas might have
Yeah.
been tricky. Oh, yeah. One final point on Rafa. He said more than once that going out through an injury is much, much worse than losing in a normal manner, and that's why he doesn't always completely open up to this extent, but he did. He said how devastated he was after defeat. He sort of takes it on the chin. He's not in a good mood, but he moves on and tries to learn from it. But he's, Wawrinka final 2014. I mentioned all the painful losses he's had at the Australian Open over the last 15 years, prior to winning it, of course, a year ago. But he cites the Wawrinka one being as far worse than losing to Novak or Rafa, despite being a setup,
Yeah.
a breakup. So yeah, so I think that's where we're at. But I we'll see him on a tennis court again soon, and it might not be his last Australian Open. And those of people making predictions on this, I think it's almost irrelevant because I don't think he knows.
And moving on to Casper Ruud, you mentioned him there. He lost to Jenson Brooksby in the second round. I'll do a little analysis on it and I'll tell you why I'm not particularly surprised that he lost. He is not much of a hardcourt player, despite, in fact, no, I'll rephrase that. He is not very good at playing players that are good at playing in hardcourts. So he can beat most of the tour on hardcourts, I would say that. And I think the US Open run wasn't a fluke by any means, but play somebody that's got amazing ad court rally temperament. So Borna Choric, Roberto Batista Agut, Pablo Carreño Busta, Jenson Brooksby, and you will be able to unpick him for sure. Because, I mean, Brooksby won. This is a really good stat, 55 points to 25 of Ruud's over 9 shots. Now, normally you're looking at the short rally length. That's the length that makes most of the difference. But here, 30% of the points played in that rally length, and Brooksby overwhelmingly won them. And a lot of the time, it was just getting an unforced error from the Ruud backhand. I mean, Ruud was forced to hit 61% of his shots as backhands, 24 unforced errors from the Ruud backhand in the 9 shot rally length. There's your story. I mean, Ruud's backhand is still a weakness, despite all the improvements he's made to it against somebody with an amazing backhand or ad court rally temperament, a la Nadal, lefties and stuff. It's going to be really, really difficult for Ruud to come out with the win. And he looked like the second best player by far there.
I'm like you, not overly surprised. Yeah, he could have gone out in the second round. He could have got to the semi-final, but I think a bit like Ons Jabeur. I don't know if it was you I was talking to about this. A lot of parallels between those two. Both seeded two, but they were a long way from being the second favourite in this tournament, in my opinion.
Yeah, good summary. And I think I will move on to Ons Jabeur on the back of that, actually. She went out to Marketa Vondrousova in the second round, and exactly the same feeling going into the match. Jabeur definitely not the favourite there, and wouldn't have been the favourite in the third, wouldn't have been the favourite in the fourth. It would have been a matter of time, even if she had beat Vondrousova. Now, I do know Jabeur maybe was holding a little bit of an injury, but just to elaborate on her hardcourt form, I think this really puts it into perspective, John. Last year, Jabeur was 20th in the top 50 in terms of hardcourt win rate. And now that's including the US Open. I mean, if you took the US Open out of there, which isn't fair, but just for argument's sake, the rest of the year she was 37th in the top 50. So you're talking, 13th worst out of the top 50 in hardcourts. She really splits her matches, or worse, on the surface. The US Open run obviously gave her a boost, but either way, it's worth just considering the fact that it's very even for any opponent she plays in a hardcourt, given she isn't able to employ as much variety, slices and stuff, different heights and spins, aren't exacerbated by a hardcourt where clay and grass would do the same thing. So it's very difficult for her to play as comfortably as she would like when she's playing on the sort of true bounce of a hardcourt, and it shows.
Yeah, yeah. I do think the injury does play a role in this, and I think it's probably third on the list of reasons why Ons Jabeur, like Casper Ruud, for me was very very unlikely to win this tournament. Second on the list was her draw, as you said, it was just going to get worse and worse for her, and the U.S. Open final runs for her and Casper Ruud for me were the outliers in terms of their abilities on this surface, and not the norm. Taking nothing away from either of those, but this is the norm. This is the norm.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so, John. Another one that maybe did catch everybody by surprise, Taylor Fritz ended up losing to Alexei Popyrin in 5 sets. The only stat I could dig out that was very telling, because I was aware the Grand Slam matches he's played now maybe are starting to become a bit of a theme. There's maybe nerves there. Looking at his break points saved, now this is big. Last year, he was winning 67% of his service points overall. There you go. Okay, so break points should be exactly the same, right? It's another service point. Why not 67%? Okay. So breakpoint saved rate down to 62%. Not the worst in the world, considering the other player might be trying to win breakpoints. With me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Breakpoint saved in Grand Slams, 52%. A 15% drop from
Okay.
your normal service point one rate to break point one rate in Grand Slams. That's big. Because I'll give you a Djokovic comparison. Yes, his breakpoint saved rate goes down from his normal service point rate, 70% to 64%, but it goes up in slams to 68%. So he's got a 2% drop from service points one to break points one in slams, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Fritz has 15%. That's it. I mean, that hopefully puts it into some sort of perspective, but it just shows you basically against somebody like Popyrin as well, who's not the best returner in the world, obviously. Maybe there's a little bit of a ropiness to his serve under pressure. That's maybe where it shows up. So Fritz has got a lot of work to do. That Popyrin match, I don't think he broke serve more than once the whole time. It was just very ropey from start to finish. Popyrin obviously benefited from the crowd as well. Yeah, alarm bells in terms of maybe how far Fritz can go, John. Or I mean,
Yes.
he got to the semis of Wimbledon, right?
Quarter,
Quarters of Wimbledon. Quarters
quarterfinal
of
of
Wimbledon.
Wimbledon this year,
Yeah.
or 2022. Still feels like this year. Yeah, I think so. We don't want to push the panic button too often on certain scenarios, and we try to keep our heads a little level here. But mentioning those stats, and then you throw in the fact he's 25. Actually, I don't know why I thought he was a year or two younger than that. By the time, so Tsitsipas is 24, a year younger, and he's been in a Grand Slam final and a couple of semis, I believe. And we still feel as though there's unfulfilled potential there, especially when it comes to New York. Dominic Thiem is 29, but by the time he was 25, Fritz's age right now, he'd already been in a French Open final, etc., etc. And of course, he won his first slam, I guess, at 27, something like that. Medvedev is 26, so you can tell by the age of 25, he'd already won his first Grand Slam. He'd already been in semi-finals and finals as well. I'm sure I'm missing off other players of this age group, and he's now, that's two Grand Slams in a row. I'm not sure Popyrin second round would be.
No, I don't think it is.
No, exactly. And I just heard some people say that, but Popyrin second round, Basilashvili first round. You know, Jack Draper was the first round opponent for Nadal, and I think a
Exactly.
fit Jack Draper probably would have knocked Taylor Fritz out as well. May have knocked Rafa Nadal out, by the way. So yeah, I think it is now, because I think this is the year. This is it. You know, it's not saying this is it, but you know, this is the year that Taylor Fritz, if he wants to go in, and he set his own goal of improving. Last year, I think he posted his resolutions for 2022, if you follow, but at the end of 2021, he posted on Twitter recently saying, you know, basically winning a Masters 1000, year-end top 10, ATP finals, etc. Surely this year, Grand Slam final, Grand Slam win. Probably not going to happen at Roland Garros. Puts a lot of pressure on for Wimbledon.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you mentioned about psychological, and maybe feeling like that's the last thing he's got to do in his career, something at a slam, the only thing he's got to improve. So there's other top 10 players you can point to technical improvements they need to make in their game. Fritz, honestly, pretty much nothing. Almost everything is really, really good. But you would pretty much say it's all psychological. Whereas maybe there's other players you couldn't just say it's psychological. Fritz, loads of improvements to make there. That's my conclusion. Final stat, because I forgot to mention it, but it really puts it into perspective. In the top 50, break points saved in Grand Slams, he's second lowest. So there you go, last year. Second lowest. Anyway, Medvedev ended up losing to Sebastian Korda in straight sets. Very interesting, because John, like me, you were sort of to and fro between who's going to win this match. We were thinking Korda before the tournament. I'm pretty sure we had that in the bracket, both of us. I was saying Medvedev before the match, just given how his first two matches went. However, I maybe you were always saying Korda, actually, because I think you weren't so keen on Medvedev as opposed to being positive on Korda, right?
That's fair. I took a lot of stock in Korda's run in Adelaide, but as you say, it's also about Medvedev. He actually sent an interesting tweet just before we went and started recording this. Great line from Medvedev's press conference from last night. And this is him talking. Not every player is capable of playing the way Korda does. So that's beautiful. If I did it, I'd be ranked 700 in the world. Yeah, he's funny, isn't he? So that's nice that that he brought some humor to his press conference, because of course we all remember how it was from a year ago and that presser he gave after his defeat to Nadal. But yeah, it's a year now. It's a year now of disappointment, if you like, and he's more disappointed. That if you think we're disappointed for him, he's even more disappointed. He was asked to analyze his year. I think it was in December. He was asked this question, and he said there's not a lot to analyze. In other words, there's not a lot to cheer about. At least I know he won a couple of titles, but if you're Daniil Medvedev and you win two titles, you want probably a Slam and a Masters 1000. You don't want a 250 in Los Cabos and a 500 in Vienna. So yeah.
Yeah, of course. If we dig into the sort of minutiae of his game, I was mentioning a lot last year, double faults and big points, that did show up to Korda, but really bigger picture is more relevant. Honestly, in this match, and like a lot of his top 10 matches, Medvedev is kind of there, but the other player has always looked the better player throughout the match, right? So Korda looked like the better player from start to finish here. Medvedev almost relied on his ability to kind of get in the head of the other player, right? To kind of scrap his way to something that looked like he could have won the match. I mean, the third set was kind of to and fro, and it was only because Korda was forced to play shots he didn't want to play. That is the Medvedev effect. However, at the end of the day, the better player won. And that's going to be the case with Medvedev until he steps up his game a bit more.
Yeah, maybe there's a loss of confidence, which is only getting compounded. And probably when you're a bit short of confidence and you don't have a great draw, perhaps, and a third round against Sebi Korda, yeah, in my opinion, is a rough draw. Bearing in mind who's Novak had to play today, Dimitrov. I think Medvedev beats Dimitrov, for example. Rafa would have played Nishioka, for example. I think Medvedev beats Nishioka, and maybe he needs to get past a fourth round at a major, which he now hasn't done since that Australian Open run. Of course, he didn't play Wimbledon, and clay's not his thing. But yeah, it's becoming a concern.
Yeah, a drop out of the top 10 definitely seems to be fair, I would say, John. Yeah, feels fair. Right, enough of the upsets. Let's talk a little Murray madness, I think. If you didn't catch it, I'll very quickly sum up the the madness that happened. We had him facing Berrettini in the first round, went 2 sets up. Berrettini closed it back to 5. There's a match point, and they say Berrettini blows that, maybe I should say, and he goes on to win that match. That's 5 hours, goes into the Kokkinakis match, drops the first 2 sets, goes down a break, it's 5-2. We're all like, well, fair enough, he put on a good effort. Goes on to play the longest match of his career, 5 hours and 43 minutes long, and wins an absolutely superhuman effort. Insane. And today loses to Bautista Agut after looking terrible in the first set, by the way. He lost the first 12 of 13 points and then made it very competitive. Second set, saved 2 set points. Third and fourth, still fairly competitive. Yeah, I'm just about recovered from it. John, how did you? Anything on it? Where do we
Yeah,
start?
no, a couple of things at the very least. First of all, I think he gave a lot of energy to a tournament that, in my opinion, for the first 48, 72 hours was perhaps lacking that in some respects. We didn't have any crazy upsets to talk about, but we also didn't really have that many epic matches either. And he certainly provided that by the bucketful. Perhaps today was just one step too far. He looked a bit leggy in that first set in particular. And as you say, losing so many of the opening points, it wasn't just going down, I think it was 3-love, but it was just the amount of points that he was winning in those first 3 games. But he did in his press conference today, just regarding his defeat anyway to Bautista Agut in 4 sets, he said he no regrets in that he just gave it everything. So it's what more can you do? And he's tweeted it as well in the last half an hour. So we're really getting some comfortable current stuff here. Clearly, he's on the way to go to bed and have a well-earned rest. And he said this in his tweet, which was 30 minutes ago. 2 days ago, I randomly bumped into the doctor who in 2017 told me, the good news is the problem you have in your hip can be fixed, but you won't be able to play professional sport again. And then he says, I think we dispelled that myth in the last 5 days. Good night.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. The commentator at the end of the Kokkinakis match, by the way, one of the best lines of commentary I've ever heard to end a match, just said, he's officially superhuman. That's it. I mean, for the rest of his career, he's officially superhuman.
I did a show with Scott Barkley about 3 or 4 months ago, and where there's this the thing in the background, I guess, throughout some of these comments that were being made were the comments from Mats Wilander, basically saying he should retire about 2.5 years ago. I think those comments were made. And the thing is, not only is he, of course, he's dispelled it this week, but he didn't really need to do that, really, in my opinion. But the thing is this, I said to Scott, if he's continuing to provide memories, if he goes out in the first round of every tournament he plays for the rest of 2023, for example, but, he has a great run at the Davis Cup and Britain get to the final or something, and Matt Murray inspires that run, or, or he doesn't go, he goes out in the first round of every tournament, but he makes the third round of Wimbledon with a couple of epic 5-setters, or he gets to the final of Queens, or he lifts a 250, or it all makes it worth it. And that's just winning 3 or 4 matches a year, in my opinion, that can make it still worthwhile. And listen, as I say, I think the Australian Open, certainly, and me as a fan, as well as a commentator, if you like, or broadcaster, have really been very pleased to have him at the Australian Open this year.
That's such a good way to put it, John, because honestly, he made the first week. We could talk about a few other things, but the one thing I really wanted to mention on a positive note, this is by far the best tennis we've seen him play in about a year. 2022 was a pretty miserable season overall. There
Yep.
was a few sort of highlights, but really overall, nothing for us fans to feel particularly good about. That was definitely 2 of the best quality matches, 3 best quality matches we've seen him play in ages, and it's incredibly important that he brings that to the rest of the season.
If you can make the third round of the Australian Open, where the field, in my opinion, field of possible winners, if you like, is much deeper than it is, say, at Wimbledon, for example, where the field is a bit thinner. If you get to the third round in Australia with that kind of draw, you can easily make the second week of Wimbledon with a kind draw.
We will do is some 4th round picks, kind of quick, sort of
Sure.
instinctual stuff with a little elaboration, John, where you feel it's necessary. First one in the top half for the men's, Nishioka Kachanov. What do you think?
I'm very much in favour of believing this will be a Kachanov win, but I don't know whether you agree, because I'm sure you said yesterday, maybe it was just the fact that you think it'll be more competitive than I do.
Yeah. I think it'll be competitive. I think it could be 5 for sure. Nishioka's playing well enough, but Kachanov's steady enough to deal with Nishioka's steady-ish game as well. I mean, Nishioka's as steady as it gets, but actually he's more aggressive maybe than people make him out to be, which is why I think it'll go 5. I just think Kachanov's a proper slam player. People
Yeah,
don't really give him the credit for getting to quarters, semis
semis.
repeatedly. Yeah, give him it. Definitely. I think Kachanov wins it.
Yeah, me too.
Korda, Hurkacz, tougher one.
Yes, I'm going Sebi Korda if he reproduces. If both players reproduce the form that they've shown in the first 3 matches, put it that way, and even maybe pre-tournament as well, like I say, Korda get to the final, Korda wins. And
Korda,
I
yeah.
do think he's dispelled some of the concerns about his mental toughness
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that match with Medvedev. I mean, don't forget he was serving, I think, for the first set. He was certainly the front runner in that first set throughout, and he was certainly a break up. And I thought this is going to be tricky. He then ekes out a lead in the tiebreak. Medvedev eats that back again. So you've got to show some mental toughness, I think, to beat first of all to beat Medvedev in straight sets. But when you've had a couple of psychological blows, you've got to come back from that. So I'm not saying he's dispelled them because we are in unknown territory right now with Sebi Korda. But yeah, I'm going Korda.
Yep, same. Hurkacz, contrastingly, has still got that monkey in his back about
Yeah.
hard court slams and hasn't been past the second round bar this tournament. Maybe it's a new beginning for him, but yeah, more likely Korda reproduces that form, I think. So I'm going Korda as well.
Hmm.
Tsitsipas Sinner is a bigger question. Tsitsipas for me.
Yeah, for me, it's actually an easier one than the previous two you just touched on. It's certainly easier for me anyway than Hurkacz Sinner. Yeah, it's Tsitsipas for me. A year ago, the two played on this, in this tournament as well. I went into that thinking this is going to be really close, and the reason I thought it was because Sinner was playing well. He was fit and firing. And there were doubts about Tsitsipas. He was still adapting to some changes, I think, with his racket and his strings and stuff. And there was the elbow surgery, and there were a lot more doubts for me swirling around Tsitsipas this time last year. And yet the result was, and by the way, you may have noticed I touched on positives regarding Sinner a year ago that are the complete opposite now in terms of health and in terms of form. So yeah, Tsitsipas.
Yeah, Steph's still got the best forehand in the draw for me, and I think that's enough to beat Sinner with that serve too. Sinner's, yeah, question marks exactly. So easy Tsitsipas answer for me there. Lehechka, Oje Aliassim.
I'm going Felix, but partially because I think it's really tough to predict, and so therefore you're just going to go for the better player if they produce, in my opinion, right now. But there's a reason why it's so difficult, and that's because Lehecka's in form. And that win over
Yeah.
Cam Norrie cannot be underestimated. If I thought he was in form, but he'd probably go out in straight sets to Cam Norrie because Cam Norrie has shown some excellent form. But Lehecka's playing really well.
No, I'll back Lehechka. His game's very similar to Oje Aliassim's in a lot of ways, but I just think he will feel very little pressure in the fourth round compared to Oje Aliassim. I just think Oje Aliassim doesn't hurt him with his return as much as other players could do. Lehechka should fire through service games just like Felix. And then when it comes to crunch moments, why not Lehechka? It's maybe his moment at the moment. So I'm going to go for him. Bit bold, but I'll back him.
Yeah,
I
I'm going
agree.
Felix.
Probably. It could be Oje, maybe about 50-50, but I'll go for the underdog for fun.
Sure.
Uh, Rune Rublev.
I've gone for Runa. I would say 4 sets, but as Damien says, that's more of a representation of how confident you are in the outcome rather than nobody really necessarily knows how many points or sets you're going to win. But that basically tells you that it's kind of 60-40 for me in terms of my conviction for the Runa win. The reason why I'm doubting is that Rublev is playing well. It's certainly at this tournament anyway, beating his not his nemesis, because it's not quite like that, but beating Dan Evans in straight sets, and there was no injury issues with Dan. Bearing in mind they have a 4-4 head-to-head before today, it's now 5-4. But I've got Runa. Runa beat him, I think, in Paris Bercy. Runa had a tough run in terms of seeds, etc. We already know, I think he beat 5 top 10 players or something there in Paris en route to the title. But Runa's just playing so well. And I know he lost to, I think it was Nishioka just before this tournament in Adelaide, I think it was, 3 sets. But that was his first match since Paris Bercy, I believe. And I think he needed that. And now he's had these 3 matches here, straight sets wins. And I really, really want to see Runa against Djokovic in the quarterfinals because, yeah, whether Rublev wins this match, I don't think he's going to be on the quarters.
It wouldn't have been particularly fun versus Djokovic in another Slam quarterfinal. So for the sake of everybody watching, hopefully Rune, but I also think tactically, mentally, Rune at the moment, definitely.
Yeah.
De Minaur, Djokovic, we're going Djokovic, right? But is it going to be hard, basically?
No, it's not. We all know how good Djokovic is, and none more so than in Melbourne. But what could you clutch at for a de Minaur fight, if you like, or de Minaur win, or whatever? Not much. Playing quite well, let's say, in terms of his capabilities, beating Nadal quite notably in the United Cup, and playing well. And it's in Australia. And one other thing, but we are clutching at straws here, I know. One other thing, they've never played before.
Yeah, honestly, he can struggle against players that get every ball back. Simon at the Australian Open a few years ago with the 100 unforced errors.
Mm-hmm.
De Minaur brings that game to Djokovic. There's a chance that it goes 5, but I
Okay.
still pick Djokovic,
Yeah.
of course.
I mean, I'm picking
But
Djokovic more comfortably, but yeah, just some things to clutch at. Yeah, never played Diminor before, so there we go.
yeah, I think the matchup might not be as easy as people think it will be.
Okay.
Shelton Wolf.
This was the other one amongst the 8 fourth round matches that I think is really difficult to predict. And yeah, I'm going Shelton. By the
Yep.
way, Shelton, second Grand Slam, and he's potentially in a quarter final. He's definitely in the fourth round. And weirdly enough, I decided to leave him alone in terms of predicting him to go far in my bracket. Whereas in New York, on the back of some of his performances just before going into the US Open, I had him not going far, but I had him causing one or two issues. And I think I had him playing Medvedev in the third round, but he never got that far. He goes out in round 1, and I'm like, okay, not being burned because he's only just arrived on the tour, but that was very much in my mind where I kind of just forgot about him in terms of this tournament. But now in his second Grand Slam, he's in the fourth round, and I think he'll make it to the quarters.
Yeah, so do I. I think he's ready. I don't care how young he is. Wolf's absolutely great. He's improved his serve and fitness to keep up with the rest of the ATP. But Shelton was always ready for the ATP. It's just a matter of time, literally, and it's not taking particularly long. So yeah, I can see him breaking through now. This is a great opportunity. He's got a gung ho enough game right to just blast Wolf off the court. I think I'm going for him for sure, but
Cool.
quite confidently actually.
Cool.
Batista Agut, Paul.
Tommy Paul.
Yeah,
Um,
likewise, John.
yeah, Tommy Paul. A couple of reasons. I think they've got a 3-1 head-to-head in favour of Bautista Agut. I
Yeah,
think
they
the
do.
most recent one though was a win for Tommy Paul, and I could have this slightly wrong, but I'm pretty sure I checked the stats earlier.
I remember
I'm
it.
good.
Yeah,
Go
it
on.
was last year. I was going to say it was last year, and the other 3 wins were in 2021.
Yeah.
So arguably, Paul's improved his game a lot since 2021.
Listen, I think he could have gone a lot further in New York than he went, and I think got to the third round there. But I think those back-to-back 5-setters he had there. This time, he had 5 sets against Davidovich Fokina, but either side of that, he's had straight sets wins, I believe. So I think he's in good shape, and I saw him in the flesh myself in Paris. Bercy played really, really well there to beat Nadal. I actually thought he'd go even further on the back of that performance, and I think he still got to the quarterfinals. I think he might have lost to Tsitsipas there, which of course is no shame in that. But yeah, I thought he'd get to the semis actually, funny enough. And yeah, I've got him to win this game,
Yeah,
this match.
fair enough. The only thing I'll add is tactically or technically, there's a few things that fall in Paul's favour. He's a very good mover forward, and Batista is a very consistent player and can unpick people who don't finish points at the net. Tommy Paul is a net finisher. He'll do that all day long. He's
Yeah.
a very flashy, talented guy who's got the finesse to beat Batista Agut. So I'm going for him to make his first Slam quarterfinal. Moving through the ladies quite quickly here, John. We'll kind of skim over it.
Yeah.
Swiatek Rybakina, though, might take a little bit more fleshing out. Swiatek, I guess, we'll probably both go for, but it's not going to be easy. Rybakina's a big flat hitter of the ball on a hard court, the kind of player that can give Swiatek a lot of bother. I'm going Swiatek. What do you think, John?
I'm going to change my mind on this in that I had Swiatek making the quarterfinals. Or going beyond, but basically I had her getting to the semi-finals. But I watched Rybakina play Collins, and
Yeah.
was very impressive. Served very well in that match. Was clinical as well in key moments, and Yeah, I think Swiatek hasn't really been tested yet. I think she lost one game in the previous round. She was tested before this tournament when she got beaten quite badly to Pegula by Pegula in the United Cup. And and therefore I'm going to change my mind in terms of Swiatek's progress, and I've got the reigning world number one to go out.
Okay, love it, John. Good pick. And I don't think that's that crazy a pick. I'd say it's about 60-40, to be honest, if
Hmm.
Rybakina's playing well.
Hmm.
What she has shown she can do at this tournament.
Hmm.
So, okay. Ostapenko golf.
Goff, uh, not with any great conviction, 60-40 in my opinion in her favour. I think if Ostapenko brings her A game, it could even be closer than that. I think right now, Goff does have a ceiling, if you like, and that would be fourth round, quarterfinals, depending on who she plays, etc. Um, but I still think her ceiling is probably enough to get her through this tie.
I think so too. Ostapenko probably will be making most of the plays, but Goff's serve is good enough to keep her returns at bay, which is very important against Elena. And her defense is good enough that she should be able to make Ostapenko overheat. She is still overheatable. You know, she had that third set tiebreak against the world number 700 or something last year in Ostrava, I think it was. She you know, anybody can make her overheat basically, and Goff is the best player in the world at that at times. Like, her defense is incredible. So Goff, yeah, Goff definitely. Pegula Krejcikova, that's probably going to divide us, I think.
Yeah, it's going to divide us because I've got Krejcikova in my final.
Yeah.
Um, Pagula, though, is playing really, really well before the tournament and now during it as well. She was so consistent last year in the slams. Taylor Fritz would love to have that sort of level of consistency, for
Mm-hmm.
example. And so, and she's added to that, which
Mm-hmm.
says a lot. So if she's getting to quarterfinals regularly, as she was last year, and
Just also a note in that she only ever lost to the champion, the eventual champion in the quarters.
right, so there you
So
go.
that's 3 out of the 4 slams she got to
Yeah,
the quarters and lost to the
exactly.
champion.
And now she, for example, Swiatek, who she lost to in New York, she has obviously beaten her quite comfortably before this. However, I'm going for Krejcikova. I went for Krejcikova at the beginning of the tournament. She's also looked really good. She's not dropped a set either. Something's got to give. Please, please give us 3 sets in this match. And yeah, 51-49. I'm going Krejcikova. I will just okay. Let me just say one thing on Krejcikova, which is why I'm going for her, and this is why I got her to get to the final. We can't take too much stock in what players say about themselves pre-tournament, maybe, but they can give us a little clue. She said physically, I'm ready for 2023, much more so than I was in 2022. She had some injury issues last year. She went out in the first round of the French Open, we remember. Um, and she said she's ready. And if we think about her, she won those 2 titles before going on to win in Ostrava. So I think it was 3 titles in a row she won. It was certainly 2 in a row at the very least, anyway. And of course, she beat Swiatek in that final. Very impressive for me. For me, she's continued that form. She said she's ready, and I've backed her to get to the final, so I'm not going to change my mind now.
I won't run into too many of the stats, John, but yeah, if she's physically ready, she is always mentally ready.
Yeah,
She is a mental giant, so it's not going to be easy. My pick is Pegula, but it's not going to be easy.
sure.
Azarenka Zhu.
Azarenka,
Yeah, I don't think we need much of an
no,
elaboration on that. Zhu beating Sakari wasn't much of a surprise. Azarenka's a 2-time champion here. She's in the forefront for a reason. Azarenka, definitely.
yeah.
Pliskova Zhang.
Uh, Pliskova,
Yeah, again, same sort of thing. Although Pliskova was vulnerable before this year, arguably before the end of last year. She played a few good tournaments. She's always been capable of getting back to her best. This looks like she is. People might think she's vulnerable. She's not as vulnerable as you'd maybe expect.
mm-hmm.
So, Pliskova. Lynette Garcia.
Garcia. A couple of reasons, other than some of the obvious ones. Lynette, I saw her play today, played pretty well, struggled to close it out. Damien, I did ask Damien at that point, has she got a nerve management reputation in terms of not being great? And he said yes. So that doesn't bode well the further we go in this tournament. And listen, Garcia is ready to expose that.
Yeah, Garcia I think is a fairly easy pick there. Sabalenka Bencic.
Really tricky. I mean, if if Sabalenka was playing somebody, let's say a little bit lower down the tennis food chain, if you like, it would be much easier to predict because I think she's playing arguably the best tennis of her career. Um, Always an issue though with Sabalenka. We just don't really know. We don't have a huge amount of faith in Sabalenka when it gets to deep moments in tournaments, but perhaps that's going to come up more in the quarters or the semis for her. So I'm going to go with Sabalenka. I've got her to win the tournament. There's nothing that I've seen so far that would suggest otherwise. But listen, this could be a mini final or a mini semi final because I really do think the winner of this one probably will go on to get to at least the semis.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going Sabalenka. I think 2023 is a new beginning for her. 2022 was ropey, but still good tennis from her. It just was very, very up and
Yeah.
down. And it looks like she's got rid of all her problems. So Sabalenka's time, I think, is now the final one. Vekic, Linda Fruhvirtova.
I'm going for Vekic, not just because her name is slightly easier for me to pronounce. I think Fruhvirtova has excelled to get this far, and I just think this might be a step too far. I mean, listen, I'm not overly confident about Vekic. She's had a good tournament as well, but yeah, I'm going to stick with her.
Right, John, I think we'll finish there. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, please check John out on Twitter at jsilk. Go to Talking Tennis on YouTube, on the line. Follow that on YouTube. Yeah, same thing. Like and subscribe. You know the drill by now. Thank you very much for joining me, John.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you next time in the Online Tennis Podcast. Cheers.